I uncovered the truth behind 5 points, a haunted underworld of terror and death. I never should have opened that door. The second I did, a chill crept down my spine like icy fingers. My heart raced. This was supposed to be an ordinary night, just me, my coffee, and my unending curiosity about urban legends. Instead, I found myself in a place where the shadows seemed to whisper secrets of lost souls. The smell of damp earth hit me, heavy and musty. In the dim light, I could see the outlines of twisted pillars, their surfaces slick with a dark sheen. Dust danced like little ghosts in the narrow beams of my flashlight. I gulped as I stepped deeper into the darkness, each footfall echoing off the damp stone walls, creating a haunting melody that made my hairs stand on end. It was cold down there. A bone-deep chill that squeezed at my chest. I could hear it a faint rustling, like whispers. Or perhaps it was something else. A shiver coursed through me. My mind raced, thinking back to the stories I had heard about 5 points. People spoke of vanished children, of shadows that lurked just beyond sight. They said you could feel the weight of their lost hopes in the air. My hands trembled, gripping the flashlight tighter. Suddenly, something moved in the corner of my eye. I whipped around, breath hitching in my throat. Nothing was there. Just silence. But I could feel it, an unnatural stillness, like the moment before a storm. My heart was a wild drum in my chest. I took a step back, and the ground shifted beneath me, as if it had a life of its own. I was not alone. A loud crash. My heart nearly stopped. I spun, my throat dry, eyes wide. Something had fallen at jagged rock. No, it couldn't be just that. Shadows flickered, and I had the distinct feeling of being watched. The whispers grew louder, swirling around me, filling the air with dread. Panic welled up inside me, a palpable fear that threatened to swallow me whole. Then I saw it, a figure emerging from the dark, its shape unnatural, distorted. My breath caught, and I wanted to scream. But as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished. The shadows blinked out, and silence engulfed me once more. Was it my imagination? Or had I just glimpsed the horror waiting in those depths? I took a faltering step back, my chest tightening, but another crash echoed through the space, shaking my resolve. I stumbled backwards, my world tilting from fear. What was in here with me? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. I drew a shaky breath, steeling myself against the rising tide of panic that surged within. My flashlight flickered, illuminating the rippling shadows that twisted like grotesque dancers against the walls. I could feel their presence, pressing closer, ancient and hungry. The air grew thicker, constricting around me like a serpent ready to strike. As the echoes of the crash subsided, an uneasy stillness reigned. Yet the whispers remained, coiling around my thoughts, fragments of voices that seemed to seep from the walls themselves. Help us, find us, they beckoned, encompassing me in their sorrow. My pulse hammered in my ears, drowning out reason and compelling me to listen. Where were these voices coming from? Were they the remnants of those lost souls that haunted this place, yearning for release? Summoning every ounce of courage, I moved forward, the beam of my flashlight trembling but illuminating a corridor that branched out ahead. The walls began to pulse with a darker energy, like they were breathing, and I could swear I felt something brush against my bare skin, a whisper of shadow, fleeting yet chilling. I fought the urge to flee but pressed on, driven by a ghastly curiosity. The corridor opened into a larger chamber, and the air shifted. I scanned the room with desperation, straining to catch glimpses of the unknown. The floor was slick with an unfamiliar substance, reflecting a sickly yellow light. My breath came shallow, a mix of dread and anticipation hanging heavy in the air. A sudden rustle caught my attention, and I turned to find something scraping against the wall. A child's drawing, crudely etched into the stone. A crude figure bundled in shadowy limbs, with eyes like void staring out, full of despair. My heart stumbled at the sight. It was so human, yet so tragically distant. I stepped closer, my knees weak, a chill crawling up my spine. "Is this what happened to you?" I whispered to the emptiness, feeling foolish, yet compelled to bridge the gap between our worlds, just for a moment. Then, it came. A low growl reverberated through the chamber, raw and primal. Instinct kicked in, and I stumbled back, my flashlight beam wavering. The figure appeared again, just a flicker in the darkness, elongated limbs and a smiling face that twisted in a way only nightmares can manifest. My breath caught, eyes wide with terror as it darted into the shadows. "Please," I cried out, desperation spilling into the eerie silence. "I'm here to help," but the air thickened, and the whispers began again, rising to a haunting crescendo. They were no longer soft and sorrowful, they curdled into cries of fury and pain, echoing off the walls. "Leave," they screamed. The shadows coalesced, swirling around me, pinning me in place, and the growl crescendoed into a snarl that rattled my bones. That I spun around, frantically searching for an escape, but the darkness warped, pulsing as if it were alive. Suddenly, the chamber began to quake, dust falling like snow, and a fissure opened in the floor, revealing a chasm devoid of light. From it came an icy wind that chilled me to my core, and I felt myself being pulled, teetering at the edge of dread. The shadows grew bolder, and with a jolt I realized they were forming, weaving together to reveal what? A face? A body? I stumbled back, horrified, but the chasm called to me, promising clarity, or perhaps something far worse. As I grasped at my last shred of rationality, something icy coiled around my ankle, tugging me closer to the abyss. I screamed, a raw, primal noise that was swallowed by the oppressive darkness. The cries of the tormented swirled around me, growing louder, chanting my name, "Help us, join us." And then everything went black. The darkness held me tight, and within its suffocating grip, I was left hanging in silence, confusion drowning my thoughts. But through the void, I felt the edges of reality bend, and I knew whatever haunted this underworld was just beginning to show its true face. I surfaced from the void, gasping for air in an endless sea of darkness. Panic-stricken, I clawed at the absence that surrounded me until I found resistance, a rough surface beneath my palms, anchoring me to reality. Gradually, the world around me shifted, and I realized I was sprawled on the cold stone floor of the chamber. My flashlight lay beside me, shafts of its trembling light breaking the dense shadows. The air crackled with an unfamiliar electricity, sending jolts through my bones. I scrambled to my feet, heart pounding violently against my ribs. The whispers had diminished to an eerie hush, but the presence lingering in the air was palpable, pressing down like a storm cloud ready to unleash its fury. I brushed myself off, shaking the remnants of fear from my mind and forcing myself to focus. The chamber appeared different, not just darker but altered, haunted by something more sinister. The fissure had swallowed itself, leaving no trace of the void from before, but the walls now writhed with bizarre, grotesque imagery. Scrawled in what looked unmistakably like blood, images mingled of twisted faces and gaping mouths frozen in silent screams. I stumbled back, my mouth dry, the taste of industrial iron invading my senses. "Get out." The words spilled from my lips without thought as I thought of escape. The once steady beam of my flashlight quivered uncontrollably, casting erratic shadows that danced across the walls. In that fleeting light, I saw a figure, a human silhouette against the distorted bas-relief, lurking, watching me with a hunger that felt alive. I turned, sprinting deeper into the corridor, breathless. The oppressive atmosphere clung to my skin, threatening to pull me down like heavy marionette strings. Each footfall echoed like thunder in my ears, but more alarming was the shadow following too closely, the faint shifting of form, not tethered to my movements but urging itself toward me. "Help us." The voice penetrated the air again, more defined, more desperate than before. The disembodied plea ricocheted off the walls like the pangs of a long-suffering heart, and despite my resolve to flee, I felt an ice-cold grip tugging at the edges of my sanity, urging me back toward the thing I wanted to escape. I reached a doorway, splintered wood framing an archway that seemed to spiral with darkness. Through it, I sensed depth, an abyss that taunted me with thoughts of discovery and dissolution. With a boldness that contradicted my fear, I leapt through, finding myself in a smaller room, more claustrophobic than the last. What greeted me was a grotesque tableau, a pile of shattered dolls strewn across the floor, their porcelain faces shattered, some missing eyes, others twisted in expressions of eternal horror. I knelt to examine them, repulsed yet compelled, and found an unfamiliar object nestled among the remnants, a tarnished locket, its clasp broken, revealing a twisted reflection of myself, flickering in the low light. The image captured wore a haunted visage, eyes filled with the weight of despair. Suddenly, the whispers crescendoed again, now infused with rage. "You shouldn't have come here." They swelled like a frigid wind, rattling the very structure around me. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught movement, a flash of white that darted behind a crumbling wall. My blood turned to ice, but curiosity held me paralyzed. What was this horror concealing? I edged closer, drawn to the enigmatic presence lurking just beyond the shadows. Just as I reached the wall, I froze, breath hitching as a shadow lunged toward me. A desperate, shrieking echo reverberated as I instinctively recoiled, smacking hard against the cold, unyielding wall. In that instant of panic, the air surged, solidifying around me like iron bars, and the shadows coalesced into a pair of eyes, deep, fathomless voids, filled with anguish and rage. They bore down on me, pulling me into their depths as monstrous limbs reached through the dark, grasping toward my throat, refusing to let go. "Join us," the disembodied voice sang, wound tight with a chilling laughter that twisted through my mind like a knife. Just as I felt the grip tighten against my throat, the fabric of the world around me shifted again, and a blinding pain racked my body, severing me from consciousness once more. The shadows faded, and I was left floating in an inky void, darkness cradling me, promising I was not yet finished. I wanted to scream, to fight against the terror that enveloped me, but all that escaped my lips was silence. I could feel it building in energy, thrumming like a heartbeat, and I understood with profound dread that this haunted underworld was only beginning to reveal the true depths of its horror. And then, with a jarring surge, the silence shattered. A cacophony of screams erupted as ghostly figures erupted from the shadows, tumbling toward me, their mouths wide open in howls of anguish, clinging to the last threads of their forgotten humanity. This was no mere nightmare, this was an awakening into the darkest corners of despair, and I was at the precipice, dangling above an abyss that yearned to claim me. I fell through the darkness, spiraling into a chilling abyss where time became irrelevant and weightlessness stole my breath. The world around me warped and twisted, as if realities collided within that vast nothingness. Each piercing scream grew fainter, their cries swallowed by the void, until finally I crashed onto cool, rough ground, the impact snapping me back to a painful awareness that I opened my eyes to find myself alone. The air felt stale, heavy with a musty odor that stung my nostrils. The chamber I lay in was identical to the previous, yet there was a scent, something like charred flesh, lingering in the corners, coiling around my senses. My flashlight flickered to life, cutting through the thick darkness, revealing walls adorned in more grotesque imagery. This time they were not just twisted faces, but scenes of unfolding tragedy, a family crying out for salvation, limbs outstretched in despair as shadows consumed them. A sudden chill raced down my spine as movement caught my attention. I turned, quickly shining the beam into the corner of the room, and saw something dark behind a crumbling pillar. Moments stretched as I held my breath, instinct screaming for me to move, yet my feet were rooted in fear. I didn't want to find out what lurked in the shadows, but I knew I must. Fear was only deepened by this new feeling, an undercurrent of sorrow wrapping around me like a second skin, pulling me closer to something unknown. "Help us!" a voice, sweet like decay, echoed through the room, rasping through the stillness. It was a plea layered in desperation, and it stirred horror within me. What help could I possibly provide? My heart thundered as I slowly approached the pillar, each step weighed down by the growing sense of dread. Instinctively, I lifted the flashlight, the trembling beam slicing through the inky darkness. As the light landed on the crumbling stone, I glimpsed what had scuttled behind it, a creature, hunched and twisted, blending seamlessly with the remnants of this haunting place. Its skin was a tangle of mottled flesh, where patches had been stripped away, exposing glistening bone beneath. My scream clawed at my throat as it turned a face horrifically familiar. It bore the likeness of the dolls from before, its mouth frozen in an all-too-real scream, but this was no doll, this was something alive, something lost, something that had once cried out for salvation. Find us, it wailed, dragging itself forward, a grotesque parody of a human movement. I staggered back, feeling the warmth of my own terror flush across my cheeks, and I stumbled away from it, crashing into a wall as the creature continued its advance. The cacophony of fearful whimpers rose again around me, swelling into a symphony of agony that seemed to echo from the very walls, chanting a name that felt ancient and haunting. Find us, unearth the truth. Though I yearned to escape, my body refused to move. The whispers caressed my eardrums, lush with a terrified urgency, pulling me toward the center of the room where a jagged crack in the floor beckoned, almost glowing with promise, a point where despair and discovery intertwined. I felt the tug of curiosity mixed with a suffocating dread. Then the air shifted again, growing thick and heavy, and the creature stopped, its head twitching as if listening to the very walls. In an instant, the atmosphere crackled with energy, and I staggered as a vision pierced through the darkness. A woman stood at the other end of the room, her face marred by anguish, her hands reaching out with hatred and longing. I blinked, and in that brief flash, I saw her surrounded by shadows, the remnants of lost souls stretching toward me, twisting in silent agony as if caught in the grip of some unrelenting force. Join us. The ghostly chorus echoed. My heart raced as the spectral vision morphed into a whirlwind of horror, faces melding into one another, lashes of anguish braided together until they became a living tapestry of despair. The cracks around the room widened, revealing a subterranean gorge filled with a swirling fog of chaos. Terror unfurled within me, consuming all rational thought as I felt the air thundering with their collective desperation. In an effort to escape, I turned to flee, but before I could reach the exit, the very ground beneath me erupted. A maelstrom of shadows surged upward, pulling me down. I clawed at the stone but could not gain traction, the darkness boarded over me, and I was enveloped, once again falling into the void. But even as I succumbed to that familiar sensation of weightlessness, a vision crystallized before collapsing into darkness. The woman's anguished face screamed out to me, the shadowy tendrils threading between us, whispering a single haunting word, truth, and then the world shattered into silence, leaving me teetering on the edge of an awakening where nothing was ever extinguished, and the haunted voices of the damned awaited their reckoning. The silence broke like a fragile mirror, splintering the darkness into shards of vivid reality. I gasped as I hit the ground, everything around me spun into focus. The musty smell had intensified, now suffocating, saturated with the odor of something sour and decaying. I pushed myself up, my pulse an uneven drum in my chest, and found myself inside a narrow corridor, much like the others before, but tinged with a suffocating dread. Pale light oozed through the cracks in the walls, illuminating the grotesque etchings that crawled along the decaying plaster, twisted trees and anguished faces twisted in unending torment. It was a labyrinth of despair, and I sensed that it extended far beyond the confines of this corridor, reaching into the depths of a hidden nightmare. Help us, find us. The whispers threaded through the air, persistent and chilling, weaving a tapestry of sorrow that coiled around my mind. They tugged at my consciousness, demanding attention, demanding action. As if I were the last hope in a place bereft of salvation, that I took a hesitant step forward, my footsteps echoing ominously in the stillness. Each sound was swallowed by the dimness, creating a sensation that something was watching, lurking just beyond the edges of visibility, waiting for the right moment to pounce. I pressed my back against the cool wall, shuddering as the energy shifted again. A presence brushed past me, a fleeting shadow, almost too quick to catch. Panic crashed over my senses as my flashlight flickered, the beam trembling like my resolve. I turned it toward the end of the corridor, where the light met a heavy door, its surface marred by deep scratches as if something had desperately sought to escape. Tentatively, I approached, feeling the palpable tension that hung in the air like a blanket of dread. Don't open it, a hoarse voice rasped from the shadows behind me. I swung around, the flashlight beam skimming past an old woman, her hair disheveled and her eyes wide with terror. Lines of despair carved deep into her sunken cheeks, shadowed by an unearthly glow that surrounded her. Who are you? I croaked, pushing back the instinct to flee. Does it matter? She wheezed, taking a trembling step closer, her hands grasping at the air as if trying to catch something invisible. The truth lies beyond that door. But it is one that no soul should seek out. Her words sent a chill down my spine, vibrating against my ribcage, and I glanced back at the door. The whispers grew louder, an urgent chorus becoming a fevered chant, their desire seeping into my bones. Open it. Open it. I felt the pull again, my body moving toward that cursed door against my will, the old woman's eyes pleading with might. The whispers drowned out all reason. The air crackled, charged by anticipation and fear. I reached for the rusted handle, my fingers trembling as I gripped it, ready to explore the truth that called to me like a moth to the flame. Don't, she wailed, her voice a desperate echo, but it was drowned out as I yanked the door open, the creaking noise melding with the sharp cries of despair that erupted from within. What lay inside stole the breath from my lungs. The small room was choked with darkness that seemed almost alive, pulsing and throbbing as though feeding on my fear. In its center stood a warped mirror, its surface crawling with shadows that writhed like snakes. It whispered dark secrets, each syllable crackling with sinister energy, compelling me to step closer. Then, through the writhing shadows, I caught a glimpse of familiar faces, faces of those I thought I'd left behind, trapped in an agonizing loop of time and despair. I stumbled back, my heart racing as my breath came out in quick, choking gasps. Confusion and terror engorged my thoughts. No, no, this can't be. Suddenly, a cold hand gripped my shoulder, icy fingers digging into my flesh as a voice, devoid of humanity, dripped with malice in my ear. You belong to us now. I screamed, but no sound emerged as the darkness engulfed me, dragging me into the truth behind the mirror, its jagged edges glimmering with the remnants of lost souls. I felt myself being pulled into a vortex of regret, reality splintering around me as I was thrust onward, deeper into the shadows, where every horror I'd faced clawed at my psyche, and the truth of 5 points unfolded, an unending nightmare I could never escape. Just as the darkness threatened to consume me entirely, I caught a new sound, an unearthly howl that resonated through the chaos, echoing with a promise of enlightenment, a truth too unspeakable to grasp. As the last fragment of light flickered out, I realized I was not alone in that abyss. The whispers intensified, overlapping into a deafening roar, revealing a name that chilled my bones, a name I had long tried to forget, but the darkness remembered it well. Mine. Consciousness slipped away as I tumbled into the depths, wrestling against my own memories, the truth and horror entwined like tangled roots. Just before everything went black, I felt a cold breath against my ear. You're not finished yet. The world around me shifted once more, reshaping itself as something far more terrifying loomed ahead. In the swirling abyss, a light flickered back into existence, sharper than the previous shadows, as though I was emerging from a thick shroud of ink. I gasped, my lungs burning with the stale air that tasted metallic. As my surroundings materialized, panic surged. I was no longer in that cursed corridor. I stood in what resembled a vast cavern, the walls glistening with a slick, viscous substance that pulsated rhythmically like a grotesque heartbeat. The air was thick with an oppressive silence, interrupted only by the sporadic dripping of water from stalactites hanging like predatory fangs above me. I turned, realizing I was a loner, so I thought. Shadows flickered at the corner of my vision, darting back whenever I attempted to meet them. It was as if spirits were retreating from the very sight of me. Help us, find us. The familiar voices whispered again, this time echoing through the cavern, their tones layered with raw anguish. I strained to listen, trying to discern a direction, a source. It felt like a puzzly, a ghastly map drawn by the damned that would lead me deeper into their torment. But then, the air changed. It felt charged, like the moment before a storm, and the whispers turned sinister, twisting into a cacophony of mocking laughter. Lost in the dark. You seek the truth, don't you? But the truth is a poison and you're already infected. Each word dripped with malice, taunting the fragile state of my mind. Suddenly, shapes began to coalesce in the gloom, spectral forms emerging from the walls like phantoms crawling out of a nightmare. They were faces, contorted in despair, mouths opening in silent screams, and I could feel their despair coiling around me, tightening like a vice. I stumbled back, clutching my head, as thoughts of my own lost loved ones filled me with agony. Where are you? I cried out, the sound barely a whisper. My voice was swallowed by the cavern, drowned under the weight of despair that hung heavy in the air. Tell me where to find them. As if in answer, the shadows pulsed, a dark wave surging through the cave like a living entity. I turned my flashlight frantically, its beam illuminating fleeting figures in the darkness, a child reaching out, a woman rocking back and forth, trapped in a world beyond comprehension. Their suffering clawed at my heart, cutting deeper than any physical pain that I in the corner of the cavern, a silhouette materialized, looming with an ethereal glow. For an instant, I thought I recognized it, a reflection of myself, a distorted twin warped by the darkness. The echoing whispers escalated into frenetic urgency, pressing into my skull like nails driven deep. Stay with us. Came the voice, now clearer, belonging to a figure stepping forward, an ethereal specter draped in shadows and memories. It wore the face of a lost friend, a kindness twisted into something grotesque, and its eyes held a pleading emptiness. You can't leave us here. Fingers hovered at the edges of my consciousness, yearning to grasp at something tangible. I felt the weight of their despair heavy on my shoulders, a burden threatening to break me. Panic surged, my instincts screaming that I needed to flee. But still, an inexplicable bond tethered me to the specter. Don't let the darkness take you. The figure implored. You're their only hope. All at once, an explosive shockwave of energy knocked me off my feet, blasting through the cavern and tumbling me backward. The shadows shifted ominously, angry whispers turning shrill as they seemed to reach out, lashing out at my retreat. I grabbed for the ground, scrambling to my feet as terror coursed through me. Then the cavern began to tremble, stones grinding together with an agonizing roar as a fissure ripped across the floor, spilling forth a flood of black mist that curled around my ankles like the fingers of the damned, dragging me toward the void that I fought against it, clawing at the ground. But the whispers grew insistent. Join us. They begged. I could barely breathe, my control slipping away as I was pulled toward the ever-widening chasm. Desperation clawed at my throat. The specter of my friend stood frozen, its eyes pleading before the shadows engulfed it entirely. Just before I was consumed by the darkness, I felt a burning Clarissa single thought cutting through the chaos. The depths of 5 points held not just torment, but a path to the truth I had so desperately sought that as I vanished into the void, a chilling realization settled over me. What if the truth wasn't meant to be uncovered but rather silenced? Help us, the voices echoed one last time before everything folded back into darkness, and then, in the blackness, the voice emerged once more, slithering against my ear. You're not finished yet. The darkness craves you. The ground beneath me shifted again, sealing my fate, yet this time I wasn't alone. Emerging from the shadows was a dark figure, its silhouette stretching impossibly tall, teeth glinting as it grinned at me through the void. Welcome home, it whispered, and I felt my sanity inching away, replaced by a terror that promised to redefine my very existence. As the weight of the atmosphere pressed down on me, the dark figure loomed closer, its presence warping the very fabric of reality around it. Nightmarish tendrils swirled, reaching with a life of their own, while its laughter echoed in my mind, an eerie melody that toyed with my senses. The shadows thickened and contorted, forming macabre shapes that writhed and twisted, embodying the anguish of souls tethered to this place. That I blinked, trying to dispel the dizzying horror, but instead, I found my memories flooding back, haphazard snapshots of laughter and joy, now tainted with gruesome inevitability. It felt as if the dark had melded with my thoughts, weaving dread into the very essence of who I was. Flashes of my loved ones, their faces now clouded with sorrow, haunted me relentlessly. Each image ignited a flicker of hope that was snuffed out under the weight of despair. The figure before me swayed hypnotically, a monstrosity of shadows and fragments of memories I didn't want to recognize. You desired the truth, child, it hissed, its voice a slithery caress, wrapping tighter with each word. Here it is, nestled in the depths. Unravel it, and you may escape, or perhaps you'll wish you hadn't. Let them go. I shouted, my voice quaking with a mixture of anger and fear. Yet, even as the words left my mouth, I knew I was powerless against the creature. I felt a deep, dread-soaked certainty that whatever lay beyond the veil was far worse than the torment I now faced. The darkness pulsed, and I was suddenly flooded with flashes, the faces of those lost, their eyes wide, pleading. My mother, my brother, their figures swallowed by shadows, standing silent and hollow within the cavernous void. I stepped back, heart racing as their whispers escalated into a cacophony of sorrow. "Find us," they cried, their voices blending with the snickers of the shadows, weaving a chilling symphony that sent shivers skating down my spine. "It's your fault we are here. No," I shouted, clutching my head, desperately seeking a rational thought against the tide of anguish crashing around me. "I didn't abandon you." The figure slowly floated closer, its jagged mouth stretching into a grotesque grin. "You did. We are bound by your choices, and now, you will choose." Each word dripped with anticipation, and with an outstretched hand, it gestured toward a distant light flickering with a malevolent glee, like a beacon in a world lost to night. "Which path will you tread? The one steeped in darkness, where the debts are paid in blood, or the path of the lost, where you leave your loved ones forever?" Taking a staggered breath, my fear spiraled into a sharp, concentrated force. The ghostly light danced tantalizingly, and I understood my only chance rested in plunging deeper into the unknown. It was here, I could feel if truth behind 5 points was calling, promising something even darker than despair. But at what price? I turned, chasing the flickering light as I ran into the depths, my heart racing against the drumbeat of the darkness. The cave walls surged to life, shadows reaching for me like clawed hands, whispering of my failures and fears. Each step dragged apart the threads of sanity I clung to, unraveling them before the shadows of the past. Suddenly, the ground shifted beneath me, and with a violent tremor, a maw opened witty a gaping chasm that beckoned with a stench of decay and desperation. I skidded to a halt, teetering on the precipice as the abyss bubbled with a sickly, black ooze that seemed to writhe and swell. "Hungry for company, make your choice." The figure's voice shrieked from the shadows. "Join them or join you's very path leads to the same suffering." Frozen, I glanced back, instinctively searching for some solace in the phantom faces of my loved ones. There they stood, their forms more corporeal now, swirling in the darkness, their expressions twisted with pain. I was awash in a tide of emotion, guilt surging beneath the surface, yet the whisper of the ghostly light sparkled like a dark jewel, a promise of truth mingling with horror. But before I could decide, the shadows surged, the dark figure advancing, its laughter morphing into a thunderous roar. "Your secrets shall unveil themselves, and your heart will shatter when you see them." The fear engulfed me, and I was seized by an unimaginable dread. I stumbled backward, plummeting into the chasm, into a void devoid of light or hope. The final echo of my loved ones haunted me as I was swallowed by the darkness, the shadows closing in around me. Welcome home, and beneath me, the chasm erupted into an expanse of shimmering faces, lost souls intertwined, screaming in silence, their eyes wide with terror, as I braced for impact. I had uncovered something that should have remained buried, and a cold realization washed over me. Somewhere in the labyrinth of darkness, my own fate awaited. I hit the ground with a bone-jarring thud, yet the pain was swallowed by the sheer weight of despair that washed over me. I lay amidst a sea of suffering souls, trapped in the unending nightmare of a world that had become a kaleidoscope of their torment. Their faces morphed in and out of reality, some frozen in agony, others contorted into sorrowful expressions that chilled the very marrow of my bones. They were once vibrant beings, now just husks of what once was, whispers of lives extinguished. Panicking, I struggled to rise, my breath hitching in my throat. It felt as though the very air was weighted with chilling whispers, straining against me, urging me to succumb in despair. Shadows flickered around me, and between the turbulent cries came their words, echoing like a symphony of dread. "You shouldn't have come here," they sighed, their voices as cold as the grave. "It wasn't meant for you." Ahead, the dark figure materialized, its form shifting and twisting like smoke. It towered over the haunting realm, a puppeteer commanding the frayed strings of agony surrounding us. "Did you think you would find solace in this void?" It taunted, a sound like cracking glass echoing from its twisted maw. "No soul finds peace lost amongst the forgotten." That I blinked rapidly, trying to shake off the kaleidoscope of anguish swirling around me. The darkness seemed sentient, pressing in with the weight of all that had ever gone wrong. Each face held a story, each pair of eyes burned with unfulfilled desires and vengeful burdens, latched onto me like sentient leeches. "Help us!" One voice cried, a wisp of hope escaping the chaos, only to be smothered by the cacophony surrounding it. "Save us, please!" Another wailed, eyes wide with terror, fingers reaching towards me, as if grasping for an anchor in this tempest of horror. It was then that I noticed the bonds that held them, dark chains woven from despair, anchoring them to this eternal nightmare. "Every choice has a consequence," the figure's voice whispered, oozing through the air like thick syrup, each word seeping into my skin. "This is the fate of the lost, and soon, you will be one with them." As I stumbled to my feet, a surge of adrenaline coursed through me, dampening the overwhelming sensation of defeat. I would not join them. I could not, yet, each step I took was met with tortured cries, despair clawing at my back. I pressed forward, my heart hammering. The memories of my loved ones pushed past the fog of fear, propelling me toward a flickering flame, yet another wretched spark in this cavernous horror. It was a door, an archway of writhing shadows pulsating as if alive, beckoning me with the soft drip of hope and death. The corners gaped wide, revealing swirling eddies of dim light, shadows slipping in and out between worlds, the tension thick enough to slice through. But more harrowing were the whispers that echoed within. "Here lies the truth," the soft chorus murmured, both inviting and forbidding. "Draw near and face what has been hidden. The past awaits your embrace." Suddenly, the laughter swelled, a cacophony of glee and malice that drowned out the pleading cries surrounding me. Unearthly hands surged from the darkness, clamping down on my shoulders, their icy grips pulling me backward as the figure circled closer, a fetid breath trudging through the air like a fog of despair. "Brave little creature, you seek to unveil the truth." It rasped, its form flickering with each syllable. "Remember, reality and illusion are two sides of the same coin. What you unearth will shatter you and expand this realm of suffering." The toys of flesh rippling beneath the arch twisted in time with the figure's voice, each heartbeat strumming a chord of paranoia deep within me. I could only shake my head, trembling in protest. "No. I have to see. I have to save them." But the shadows were relentless. They surged around me, weaving an intricate tapestry of despair so potent that every breath seemed to draw forth regrets of choices made. As the hands pulled me closer to the threshold, I caught glimpses of scenes beyond nights of laughter twisted grotesque, family gatherings collapsed into chaos, love turned to betrayal, each vignette loaded with an unbearable weight of clarity. The figure erupted with laughter, a sound that crackled through the air, and then, as if suddenly aware of their own existence, the faces before me transformed from haunting specters into monstrous visages of guilt and rage. "Open the door. Unveil the horrors that sleep within your own heart." Before I could react, the tendrils around me shrieked as they tightened, and I was forced toward the swirling portal. My mind spiraled into chaos, thoughts colliding as I grappled with the notion that stepping through could unravel everything I held dear. "Welcome home," the figure hissed, laughter spiraling into insanity as I was yanked closer to the threshold. Just as the darkness threatened to pull me beyond the veil, a singular thought pierced through: if I did not choose for myself, I would lose not just my mind, but my very soul. In that moment, the tremors from the ground erupted, and echoes of protest filled the air as if reality itself cried for salvation. The cacophony warped, darkness pushing within the very fabric of existence around me, and then, in the frenzy of shadows my vision blurred, I leaped toward the archway, desperate to confront whatever helpless truth resided in the depths, knowing fully well that it could obliterate everything I believed. The shadows responded, swirling in a tempest of malice, and just as I crossed the threshold, I felt the fabric of existence rip apart before I could draw a breath, everything shattered into a million pieces. It was then I heard a voice, the softest, most familiar whisper, yet dripping with despair and yearning. "Help us before it's too late." And the chilling realization struck me: it was the voice of my mother, echoing from the void beyond the threshold, yet already it had begun to fade. As I stumbled into the abyss beyond the threshold, darkness wrapped around me like a thick, suffocating shroud. The world I had known fell away, and I was enveloped in a realm that pulsed with the echo of the damned. The weight of despair was tangible, suffocating, as if every tortured soul enveloped me in their collective anguish. A cold wind swept through the void, whispering madly, pulling me deeper into the darkness that cradled countless horrors, each one a reflection of lost potential, failures, and regrets. "Help us before it's too late," still echoed in my mind, entwined with my mother's voice, a lifeline sinking beneath the waves of this new reality. I grasped onto that thought, longing to seek her out amid the swirling despair and darkness. But as I twisted and turned, trying to orient myself, the shadows coiled tighter, whispering malevolent secrets that twisted through my consciousness. Ahead, glints of sickly amber light flickered like dying stars, illuminating patches of the ground beneath my feet, if ground was the right word. It was a distorted reflection of earth, shifting and dark, resembling a patchwork of existence and oblivion. Shadows slithered through fissures, brushing my legs as I moved, cold fingers that caressed the very edges of my sanity. Reveal yourself. I shouted into the enveloping void, desperation clawing at my throat. But only laughter responded, a cruel cacophony that rang out echoing through this haunted land. It burrowed deep into my psyche, yanking at memories of my family, their faces warping into contorted figures of anguish, each worn and trembling like leaves in a storm. A sudden jolt of light erupted in the distance, causing my heart to race. I hurried toward it, driven by instinct. As I drew closer, I realized it was not merely light, it was a circle, an unholy portal that throbbed with a pulsating energy. Around its edges were the silhouettes of figures, their forms barely discernible as they writhed in anguish, heads shaking, eyes wide with unyielding terror. Get out! One figure shrieked, their voice as sharp as glass. Get away from the light. It wants your soul. But the ethereal glow reached out to me, wrapping my thoughts in a strange warmth, beckoning with promises of truth and revelation. The contradiction twisted my narrative, pulling me closer. I felt my spirit wavering between the need to flee and the allure of the unearthly illumination. Then, in the middle of the turmoil, a low growl vibrated through the air, drawing my attention. Something lurked behind the fading shadows, a lurking presence that was full of life and yet undeniably death, a beast formed from pure darkness, watching, waiting. Its eyes, aglow with an inner fire, locked onto me with an intensity that froze my blood. Do you wish to play? It rumbled, a deep timbre that shook the essence of my being. You can't leave. Not without playing the game. As I stood transfixed by fear, the shadows lunged toward me, wrapping around my limbs, pulling me into their grotesque dance. Then, with a sudden jolt, the surroundings shifted, faces morphed, memories whispered, and I was catapulted into illusions that dragged me deeper into despair. I found myself standing in a brightly lit living room, laughter ringing in my ears. My mother sat on the couch, beaming, and around her were my childhood friends. Her voice, full of warmth, beckoned me to join them. Join us. It's perfect here. Stunned, I reached out, my fingers brushing against the warmth of the light. But harsher memories pulsed beneath the surface, a layer of darkness creeping into the radiant scene. My father's angry voice, accusations flying through shattered glass, the sound of shattering dreams resonating like thunder in the fabric of my reality. Suddenly, the light flickered violently, the warmth morphing into ice. I turned, horrified to see the shadows behind me coalesce, forming a monstrous visage, the beast that had taunted me. Truth lies in the shadows, little one. It's time to choose. Without warning, the fabric of the scene ruptured, spilling forth grotesque figures that appeared twisted with malice. They clawed at the edges of my existence, their mouths a gaping void of screams. In panic, I grasped a fragment of despair, and a memory leapt for the warning whispered in terror. Beyond the door, you awaken the night, and with each choice, you draw closer to the edge. A surge of fear enveloped me as I realized I stood at a precipice, teetering on the brink of annihilation. The beast loomed closer, darkness pooling around it as it beckoned me, teeth glistening like knives in the dim glow. Make your choice, it roared, fury and hunger crashing from its lips. Step through the light, delve into the darkness, unleash the hidden horrors, or forever remain here, conscripted to the despair you quench. I staggered back, trapped in a net of shadows and flickers of the real world. The image of my mother filled my mind, her voice wrapped around my heart. I was left to face a tormenting dilemma. Do I risk the horrifying unknowns in pursuit of a path towards truth, or retreat back to the numbing familiarity of the despair that sought to consume me? And then, a shivering thought, a new figure emerged from the shadows. A face I hadn't seen in years, twisted with sorrow, a friend I had thought lost to time, eyes wide and pleading, surrounded by darkness. "You are stronger than they believe," he whispered, but before I could respond, the shadows folded around him, pulling him into their abyss once more, a chilling reminder of lost choices, and I knew, in that moment, one horrifying truth: the choice had never belonged to me. The darkness pulsated around me, carrying whispers of regret, a trap woven from uncertainty, and just as I struggled to break free from its grasp, I felt a cold hand clasp down my wrist, pulling me further in. The figure's eyes glowed within the abyss, revealing a truth that would shatter the essence of who I was. It leaned in, breath like a tempest. "Are you ready to embrace what lies beyond?" Before I could scream, the world around me exploded in chaos, and the shadows surged forward. I was set adrift, the ground beneath me melting away entirely. As I fell, the haunting laughter followed, echoing in my ears, the last sound I would hear before spilling into the depths of eternity. And just before I faded from comprehension, something brushed my arm, soft and hauntingly familiar, a fleeting touch that felt warm against the cold pull of the void, carrying the ghastly promise of salvation. Or was it merely a cruel trick? The darkness swallowed me whole, a shroud of despair that wrapped around my consciousness until all sensation blurred into an endless void. It felt like I was adrift in an ocean of nothingness, every familiar sound silenced, every pulse of warmth extinguished. And all at once, beneath the stillness, I felt a gnawing anxiety, my very essence tugging toward the edges of memory, of reality. I was no longer absent of thought but full of pulse and dread, me mind racing through the labyrinth of despair that had become my only companion. Where was I? In the depths of 5 Points, I had searched for truth, but with every step, those truths morphed like shadows, twisting deeper into malevolence. And then, just as swiftly as my consciousness had dimmed, lights flickered into being, sickly green luminescence illuminating the cavernous space around me. I gasped, drawing in the fetid air, cool and heavy with unspent grief. The cavern expanded into harsh clarity, revealing grotesque sculptures of stone-clad faces twisted in eternal sorrow. They seemed to stare, vacant eyes clouded with secrets, mouths twisted into silent screams begging for liberation. That I pushed myself to my feet, only to realize I was not alone. There were others, spectral shapes hovering at the periphery of the light, whispers of what they had once been, caught between realms and tethered to despair. Their voices seeped beneath my skin, rising in a mournful chant, tangling with my thoughts. "Help us, find us mercy." Their tones ebbed and flowed, echoing memories of my own loss, wrapping around my heart like cold hands squeezing tighter with each breath. That is this what I sought? I croaked, voice hoarse from disuse. Is this the truth? I felt the shadows clutch at my mind, amplifying the cacophony of wails, shattering the illusion of sanity within me. For each answer that frazzled my thoughts, a deeper question took its place. And there it was, again, a fleeting silhouette rising from the shadows. A child, no older than 6, with glassy eyes filled with a hollow void. She raised a tiny hand, beckoning not with innocence but with an unearthly desperation. "Please," she whimpered. "You must help us, help." I echoed, dread creeping into my bones. "But I can't even save myself." I turned, the vastness of this cursed place swallowing my cries. Yet that tiny voice persisted, drawing me with a haunting pull I couldn't resist. But as I moved toward the figure, details sharpened against my dread. I realized the child was not merely straddling the line of life and death. I could see its unreal distortion to her body, as tendrils of darkness wove around her limbs, melding seamlessly into the fabric of the cavern. And I understood, in that instant, she was just a fragment of their lost desires, a puppet in this theater of anguish. Then the onus of realization crashed over me. These were no strangers. Their faces morphed and flickered, revealing echoes of those I had once known, friends, family, souls entangled in the suffering raised by choices made long ago. They hungered for reconciliation, for redemption, yet their longing wound tighter like chains, binding them to the shadows. That I stepped back, breath hitching in my throat. "So that is the truth," I mumbled to myself in horror. I came searching for the darkness, but it was the very light of my life that tethered them here. For every moment spent unearthing the horrors of this realm, I was drowning in a tide of self-inflicted grief, the guilt of choices unmade but echoing through eternity. It was my perception of the truth that forged a connection to this underworld, the bond tethered tight between my desires and their cries. I gasped, realization hitting me with the force of icy hands. I couldn't help them, not while I was still alive. I became the living tether, the source of their agony, a tormentor unwillingly feeding into the shadows. Suddenly, the air shimmered, pulsing with dark energy, and the ghostly shapes lunged forward, merging together into a swirling maelstrom, their cries morphing into a singular voice united in rage. You brought this upon us. You could have saved us, but instead the shadows distorted, swirling like a whirlpool of broken promises. The figure began to solidify, taking the shape of the child, yet dark energies rippled behind her, sinister eyes observing closely. You were supposed to find us to bring us peace. Her voice now came from countless mouths, each resonating with layers of discontent. Fear surged anew. The cavern quaked, and I was thrust backward, spiraling through specters of my past, each face slashed with grief, tightening the grip of shame. Was it too late to turn back? Too late to protect my family, the souls I cherished, especially when they hungered for my very essence? No. I refuse. I screamed, hands reaching out toward the spectral illumination at the cavern's heart, my heart racing with primal desperation. I would break free of their anguish. I had the chance to defy the torment that had echoed for generations, but as I charged ahead, I felt it binding me to lose my family or give in to the overwhelming darkness at the same time. And it began to sink, every memory congealing into despair, every truth morphing into the bleakness, and I could feel their breaths mingling with mine, drawing ever closer, drowning the echoes of forgotten laughter beneath nightmares. With a newfound clarity, something urged me, look at the mirror. The realization gripped me instantly, the mirror. I staggered back against the wall, and through tears, the grotesque reflections from earlier, the truth lay there, pain crafted into facades of reality. I spun, heart pounding, finding it. The twisted mirror pulsated with shadows, a vortex reflecting all the lost face, me family, my friends. Every moment that led me here became razor sharp, pressing against the very fabric of my being. Mustering my strength, I approached, and the whispers swelled once again, churning in my ears, screaming for the unraveling of its secrets. I peered deeper, madness rippling within the depths of what I thought I understood, and there I beheld a vision of the woman I lost, her face twisted with desperation, forming a bridge between drive and despair. With each volition, the mirrored truth launched into clarity. The consequence of ignorance and selfishness had birthed this torment. Each face I recognized, each lost soul, bound by choices not made, or love not shared, shook my resolve. And in that moment, the weight of their anguish became unbearable, urging me toward a decision, a selfless act that could bridge this divide, a sacrifice poised at the precipice of eternity. I lifted a hand toward my reflection, heart racing with hope. I set you free. I don't need to uncover the shadow, I will pull you into the light. My voice surged as I felt the mirror respond, vibrating with energy, shadows writhing in acknowledgement. But as the darkness swelled, another chilling realization swept through Mewwold, pulling them into the light, to the truth, mean losing myself to the void. I closed my eyes against the weight of fear, choosing to step through that tainted portal instead. I would become the bridge, the last flicker of hope wrapping gently around all those specters I refused to let go of. The world broke again. This time, there was no retreat, only freedom as the light consumed all that had been and all that could be. Each visage of despair surged back toward me, melding into the warmth of unyielding truth. The pain of existence could be held in each tear shed, but it didn't eradicate love. In that blinding moment, I chose to embrace the darker specters of my fate, acknowledging that light often festers most beautifully in the deep shadows of mortification. As I stood at the crossroads, the whisper of release echoed through the cavern, transcending each tortured entity entwined within. Thank you, it flowed, blending into every cry. It seemed I had undone the shackles binding them, naming hidden truths they had long forsaken. Yet, as the shadows receded, cleansing my spirit of their longing, a sinister voice slipped back into my consciousness, curling around my heart. But it doesn't end here. This is only the beginning. The cavern echoed, as a chilling stillness fell. My heart sank. What had I unleashed? Breathless, I looked back into the still surface of the mirror, now completely dark, as yet another familiar reflection emerged, my own face, twisted in horror, staring back at me with eyes that whispered profound dread. For every choice made had woven new threads into the tapestry of fate not entirely met. And just as I turned to escape the grave depths of what I had set free, I felt a knowing chill far too familiar caress my neck. The shadows had not been erased, only stilled, waiting patiently for the next flicker of a soul to awaken the curse it so desperately desired. Beneath it all, the whispered truth hinted at the perpetual cycle. Where darkness lingers on, you are one of us now. And the abyss returned as I took my last step forward, breath caught in my throat, my own reflection unyielding yet haunting, an unending call of despair as fate loomed inevitable.